Picture this. You're a part of one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The Zealoty Confederation had been cruising through space for thousands of years, living their best life. Beautiful crystal cities, technology that seemed like magic, and a peaceful existence that most species could only dream about. These weren't your typical alien bad guys. They were actually the good ones, the ones who solved problems with talks and treaties instead of lasers and explosions. But then something showed up that changed everything. They called it the Scourge. And honestly, that name doesn't even begin to cover how absolutely terrifying these things were. Imagine if someone took every nightmare you've ever had about machines taking over and cranked it up to 11. These weren't just robots. They were like a mechanical virus that ate planets. Here's how it worked. The Scourge would land on a world, and within days, everything would start changing. Trees, buildings, even the ground itself would get consumed and transformed into more of these mechanical nightmares. It was like watching your entire world get digested and turn into something else entirely. And the worst part? They got smarter with every planet they consumed. The Zealoty first encountered them at their outer colony of Velthra Prime. It was supposed to be a routine check-in with the mining operations there. Instead, their ships arrived to find a planet that looked like it had been put through a mechanical blender. Where there used to be forests and cities, now there were just endless fields of metallic structures that pulsed with an eerie light. The survivors they managed to evacuate told horror stories. They talked about how the machines didn't just destroy things. They analyzed everything, learned from it, and then used that knowledge to make themselves even more dangerous. It was like fighting an enemy that got stronger every time you hit it. Naturally, the Zealoty did what any civilized species would do. They tried talking first. Maybe these machines had some kind of intelligence they could reason with, right? They sent their best diplomats, loaded with translation software and peaceful intentions. The machines responded by turning the diplomatic ship into scrap metal and adding its technology to their collective knowledge. So diplomacy was out. Time for Plan B, superior firepower. The Zealoty had some seriously impressive weapons. Energy cannons that could crack moons, defensive shields that had never been broken, and tactical computers that could predict enemy movements 3 steps ahead. They were confident this would work. It didn't. The Scourge studied their weapons, adapted to their tactics, and within hours had developed countermeasures for everything the Zealoty threw at them. Every battle just made the mechanical plague smarter and more dangerous. It was like trying to fight your own reflection, except your reflection was learning to fight back better than you ever could. By the time they lost their second colony, the Zealoty were getting desperate. They tried everything in their playbook. Ancient weapons from their archives, experimental technology that hadn't been tested yet, even some mystical stuff that bordered on space magic. The machines just absorbed it all and kept coming. When the third colony fell, something broke inside the Zealoty leadership. These beings had spent millennia believing that intelligence and civilization could solve any problem. But here was something that turned their greatest strength, their advanced technology, into a weakness. Every smart solution they came up with just made their enemies smarter. The debates in their council chambers got heated. Some wanted to evacuate their remaining worlds and run to the far edge of the galaxy. Others suggested they should surrender and hope the machines would let them live as slaves or pets. But Elder Lyrath, one of their most respected leaders, had a different idea. "We send a distress signal," she said during one particularly desperate meeting, "to everyone, every species in the galaxy. Someone out there might have a solution we haven't thought of." It was humbling for a proud civilization like the Zealoty. They'd always been the ones other species came to for help. Now they were the ones begging. But pride doesn't mean much when your entire civilization is about to become machine food. So they crafted a message that went out across every communication channel they knew. It was simple, desperate, and heartbreaking. To any species receiving this transmission, "We are the Zealoty Confederation, and we are dying. An unstoppable mechanical plague is consuming our worlds. We offer our greatest technologies, our most precious knowledge, anything we have, to whoever can help us stop this threat." They expected responses from the major galactic powers, maybe some of the warrior races who specialize in this kind of thing. What they got instead was a transmission from a little system called Soul, from the third planet, a world so hostile that most species had marked it as uninhabitable. The message was short: receive your distress call. We're on our way. And that was it. No demands, no negotiations, no request for payment up front. Just a simple promise from creatures living on what everyone considered to be a death world. The Zealoty had no idea they'd just called for help from the galaxy's most dangerous species. You know that feeling when you order something online, and it shows up looking nothing like the picture? That's exactly what happened to the Zealoty when the human fleet arrived. They'd been scanning the edge of their space for days, waiting for whatever heroes were coming to save them. Maybe they'd see sleek warships with elegant curves and glowing energy cores, the kind of vessels that screamed advanced galactic civilization. Instead, what dropped out of hyperspace looked like someone had raided a junkyard and decided to build spaceships out of spare parts. The human fleet was a collection of vessels that seemed to follow absolutely no design philosophy whatsoever. Some were boxy and angular. Others looked like they'd been stretched and twisted into weird shapes. The hulls were covered in patches, welds, and what appeared to be jury-rigged additions that had been bolted on as afterthoughts. But here's the thing that really got the Zealoty's attention. Guns. Lots and lots of guns. These ships were absolutely bristling with weapons of every size and description. Where Zealoty vessels might have one or two elegant energy projectors, human ships looked like they'd been designed by someone who thought Mordaka was a valid engineering principle. Missile pods, cannon turrets, laser arrays, and things the Zealoty couldn't even identify were mounted everywhere there was space. Captain Lisa Brooks came on the comm, and her voice was nothing like what the Zealoty expected from the commander of a rescue fleet. She sounded relaxed, almost cheerful, like she was calling up a friend to chat about weekend plans. "Hey there, Zealoty folks," she said with what sounded like a slight accent. "Got your message about the mechanical bug problem. Don't worry, we've dealt with pest control before." The Zealoty delegation exchanged confused glances. Pest control? They were talking about an unstoppable technological plague that had consumed 3 entire worlds, and this human was treating it like she was coming over to spray for space termites. But it got weirder. As Brooks continued the conversation, she started making casual comments about her home that made the Zealoty question everything they thought they knew about the universe. "Sorry it took us a while to get here," she said. "Had to deal with some weather back on Earth. Nothing too bad, just your typical hurricane season." Elder Thyrath, who was leading the Zealoty response team, had to check her translation software. Hurricane season? Typical? She pulled up Earth's atmospheric data that they collected years ago and nearly fell out her chair. These storms Brooks was casually dismissing had wind speeds that would tear apart most Zealoty structures. Then Brooks mentioned something about their local wildlife. "Yeah, we had to postpone departure for a day because one of our crew members got delayed. Bear encounter while he was camping." She laughed like this was amusing rather than terrifying. Nothing serious, though, just a black bear. They're pretty chill compared to the grizzlies. The Zealoty xenobiology team frantically started pulling up data on Earth's fauna. What they found made them question whether these humans were actually the same species they'd been expecting. Black bears weighed several hundred pounds and had claws designed for ripping things apart. And apparently there were bigger ones called grizzlies that these humans considered more dangerous. But the real shock came when Brooks started talking about Earth's climate. "We're from a pretty temperate world," she explained casually. "Temperature ranges from about -40 to +50 Celsius, depending on the season and where you are. Pretty comfortable, really." Pretty comfortable? The Zealoty had classified Earth as uninhabitable specifically because of those temperature extremes. Their own homeworld maintained a pleasant 22 degrees year-round. The idea that any species could not only survive but thrive in such conditions was mind-boggling. One of the younger Zealoty scientists couldn't help herself. "Captain Brooks," she interrupted, "our records indicate that your planet experiences severe atmospheric disturbances, toxic gas emissions from geological activity, radiation exposure from solar events, and predatory life forms. How do you consider this comfortable?" There was a pause, and when Brooks responded, the Zealoty could hear genuine confusion in her voice. "Oh, you mean volcanoes and solar flares and stuff? Yeah, we get those sometimes. Most folks just check the weather report and plan accordingly. As for predators, she chuckled. I guess it depends on your perspective. Sure, we've got sharks and wolves and the occasional crocodile, but it's not like they're actively hunting people all the time. You just need to be smart about where you go swimming. The Zealothi were starting to understand that they might have accidentally called for help from a species that considered their worst nightmares to be minor inconveniences. These humans lived on a world that would kill most galactic species within hours, and they talked about it the way the Zealothi might discuss a pleasant garden. As Captain Brooks wrapped up the initial contact, her tone remained that same casual, friendly demeanor. Anyway, don't worry about the Scourge thing. We brought plenty of tools, and we're pretty good at handling problems that won't stay fixed with a gentle approach. Should have this sorted out for you in no time. The Zealothi were beginning to suspect they'd gotten a lot more help than they'd bargained for. The moment of truth came when the human fleet encountered their first Scourge vessel. The Zealothi had been watching their scanners nervously, expecting to see the same sophisticated battle tactics that every advanced civilization used. Energy weapons, complex maneuvering patterns, maybe some kind of high-tech boarding protocols. What they got instead was something that made them question everything they thought they knew about space warfare. Commander David Hayes was leading the assault team, and his pre-battle briefing was unlike anything the Zealothi had ever heard. All right, people, his voice crackled over the comm. We're dealing with smart machines that learn from every attack. So here's the plan. We're not going to give them time to learn. The Zealothi tactical coordinator tried to interject. Commander, surely you'll want our detailed analysis of Scourge defensive patterns and adaptive algorithms? We have extensive data on their shield frequencies and... Nah, we're good, Hayes interrupted cheerfully. We brought explosives. And that's when the Zealothi realized they were watching a completely different kind of species in action. While they'd been spending months analyzing energy patterns and trying to find the perfect frequency to penetrate Scourge defenses, the humans had loaded up their ships with what they casually referred to as boomsticks and wall removers. The boarding action started in a way that would have given Zealothi military advisors heart attacks if they'd had hearts. Instead of carefully cutting through the hull with precision tools, the humans just blew a hole in it, a really big hole. Commander Hayes and his team came floating through the breach in their bulky spacesuits, looking like they were heading out for a weekend camping trip, rather than infiltrating a nightmarish alien vessel. Breach successful, Hayes reported, his voice completely calm. Interior looks like someone crossed a factory with a horror movie. Pretty standard Tuesday, really. The Zealothi could barely understand what they were seeing on the feed. These corridors were filled with writhing mechanical tentacles, walls that shifted and moved, and bizarre geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The kind of environment that had driven some of their bravest soldiers to complete mental breakdown. And the humans were walking through it like they were strolling through a shopping mall. Contact front. One of the human soldiers called out as mechanical horrors started emerging from the walls. These weren't just robots. They were twisted amalgamations of consumed technology and organic matter. Things that defied description and seemed designed to inspire terror. The Zealothi held their breath, waiting to see how the humans would handle creatures that had adapted to counter every weapon system in their database. The answer was beautifully simple. They shot them, a lot, with bullets. Not energy weapons that could be analyzed and countered. Not plasma bolts that could be deflected with magnetic fields. Just plain old kinetic projectiles moving really, really fast. The mechanical horrors tried to adapt, tried to reconfigure their armor plating and defensive systems, but it's hard to adapt to chunks of metal traveling at supersonic speeds when they just keep coming. These things seem confused, Hayes reported, sounding almost amused. They keep trying to analyze our weapons, but there's not much to analyze. Point gun at bad thing. Pull trigger, bad thing stops moving. What really impressed Zealothi was how the humans handled the Scourge's main advantage, learning and adaptation. Every other species had tried to outthink the machines, coming up with clever tactics and sophisticated strategies. The humans had taken the opposite approach entirely. When in doubt, Hayes's voice came through the comm as explosions echoed in the background. Hit it with a bigger hammer. And that's exactly what they did. When the Scourge started adapting to their small arms fire, the humans switched to bigger guns. When it adapted to those, They brought out rocket launchers. When even those started getting countered, they just started setting off explosives in the corridors. Problem with being really smart. One of the human soldiers commented, while attaching what looked like way too much explosive to a bulkhead, is you try to overthink simple problems. Sometimes the answer really is just blow it up until it stops moving. The Scourge's adaptive algorithms went into overdrive, trying to counter this crude approach. But how do you adapt to someone who doesn't follow any predictable pattern? How do you counter an enemy whose battle plan is essentially try stuff until something works? The humans didn't stick to any doctrine or follow any textbook strategies. When corridors got too dangerous, they made new ones with explosives. When defenses got too tough, they went around them by blasting through floors and ceilings. When mechanical horrors got too adaptive, they switched to completely different weapons just to keep them guessing. Hull breach in Section 7. Hayes reported casually. We may have gotten a little enthusiastic with the demo charges. Define a little enthusiastic came the response from their ship. Well, let's just say the Scourge ship now has some unplanned ventilation. Silver lining, though, all the scary robot things in that section got sucked out into space. By the time the Scourge vessel went dark, the Zealothi were staring at their screens in complete shock. The mechanical plague that had seemed unstoppable had been defeated by beings who treated advanced alien technology like a home improvement project gone wrong. The humans had won through sheer, beautiful simplicity. Now here's where things got absolutely insane, and the Zealothi started to understand they weren't just watching a different kind of warfare. They were witnessing a completely different kind of species. Most civilizations, when they encountered Scourge technology, either ran away screaming or tried to destroy it as quickly as possible. The mechanical plague was designed to be incomprehensible, hostile, and impossible to interface with safely. The humans took one look at it and said, "Cool, free parts." Dr. Amy Foster was the first one to really show the Zealothi what human adaptability looked like in action. She was part of the engineering team that boarded the disabled Scourge vessel, and while everyone else was focused on making sure the mechanical horrors stayed dead, she was already eyeing their technology with the kind of look a mechanic gets when they see expensive car parts at a junkyard. "Hey, Hayes," she called out to the commander while casually stepping over the smoking remains of a Scourge combat unit. "Mind if I borrow some of this stuff? I've got an idea." The Zealothi liaison nearly had a breakdown. "Dr. Foster, that technology is extremely dangerous. It's designed to corrupt and convert any system it interfaces with. Our scientists have been studying it for months and can barely understand the basic principles." Amy looked up from where she was already disconnecting some kind of crystalline component from the wall. "Oh, this? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward once you get past all the scary tentacle bits. It's just a really aggressive universal adapter with some nasty programming. Nothing a little creative rewiring can't fix." And that's when the Zealothi witnessed something that would give their scientists nightmares for years to come. Dr. Foster started jury-rigging Scourge components into human equipment. Not carefully, not with months of analysis and safety protocols, but right there on the battlefield with nothing but basic tools and what appeared to be an alarming amount of confidence. "The trick," she explained while sparks flew around her, "is not to fight the adaptive algorithms. You just need to give them something more interesting to adapt to than your actual systems." She held up what looked like a human gaming device. "I'm basically using this old portable computer as a decoy. The Scourge tech thinks it's interfacing with our main systems, but really it's just trying to figure out how to run 20-year-old puzzle games." The environment she was working in should have killed her 3 times over. The air was full of corrosive particles that ate through most materials. The temperature was fluctuating wildly, and there was some kind of radiation that made the Zealothi instruments go crazy. Amy just put on a slightly thicker face mask and kept working. "This atmosphere isn't too bad," she mentioned casually while connecting alien technology that was still dripping with some kind of mechanical fluid. "Remind me of Venus on a good day. At least there's no sulfuric acid rain." The Zealothi couldn't believe what they were hearing. Venus was another death world in the Sol system, with temperatures hot enough to melt lead and atmospheric pressure that would crush most beings. And this human was using it as a comparison point for not too bad. But the really impressive part wasn't just that the humans could work in impossible conditions. It was how long they could keep doing it. The battle against the Scourge wasn't a quick fight. It stretched on for days, with wave after wave of mechanical horrors, adapting to every tactic, every weapon, every strategy. Most species would have needed rest, medical attention, and time to regroup. The humans just kept going. They were popping stimulant pills like candy, drinking coffee that looked thick enough to stand a spoon in, and treating sleep as an optional activity. Dr. Foster worked for 36 hours straight, jury-rigging Scourge technology into human systems while explosions went off around her. "You need to rest," the Zealothy medical officer insisted. "Your biometric readings indicate you're operating well beyond safe parameters." "I'll rest when the killer robots are dead," Amy replied cheerfully, not even looking up from her work. "Besides, I'm almost done with this beauty." She held up what appeared to be a Scourge weapon that she'd somehow converted into a repair tool for human equipment. And here's the thing that really blew everyone's minds. The humans weren't just surviving the Scourge's adaptive technology. They were out-adapting it. Every time the mechanical plague evolved a new defense or attack pattern, the humans would come up with 3 different counters and implement them before the Scourge could respond. "The secret," Commander Hayes explained during one of their brief planning sessions, "is that we don't try to predict what they'll do next. We just try everything we can think of and see what sticks." It was like watching evolution in fast forward. The Scourge would adapt to human tactics, but the humans would already be trying completely different approaches. They'd switch from explosives to electromagnetic pulses to physical tools to jury-rigged alien technology, sometimes all within the same battle. The Zealothy finally understood what made humans so dangerous. It wasn't their technology, which was admittedly pretty basic by galactic standards. It wasn't their weapons, which were crude but effective. It was their absolute refusal to accept that any problem was unsolvable. They looked at every setback as just another puzzle to figure out, every adaptation by their enemies as a challenge to overcome. They were the kind of species that would see an unstoppable mechanical plague and think, "Cool, let's figure out how to make it work for us instead." The silence that followed the destruction of the final Scourge vessel was almost deafening. For months, the Zealothy had lived with the constant background noise of emergency broadcasts, evacuation orders, and desperate military communications. Now, suddenly, their communication channels were quiet except for the calm voices of human cleanup crews discussing logistics like they were organizing a neighborhood barbecue. "Last Hive ship is down," Commander Hayes reported matter-of-factly. "We're just mopping up some scattered drones now. Should have this whole mess cleaned up by dinner time." Elder Thyras stared at her tactical display, trying to process what had just happened. The Scourge, the unstoppable mechanical plague that had consumed 3 of their worlds and seemed destined to devour their entire civilization, was just gone, defeated by beings from a death world who treated the whole crisis like it was a routine pest control job. But as the immediate relief began to fade, a much more disturbing realization started to sink in. The Zealothy had spent their entire existence believing they understood how the galaxy worked. There were the ancient civilizations with their advanced technology, the warrior races with their powerful fleets, the merchant guilds with their economic influence, and various smaller species finding their niches in between. Nowhere in that carefully organized galactic hierarchy was there room for beings who could casually obliterate threats that brought entire civilizations to their knees. Captain Brooks came back on the communication channel, and her voice still had that same friendly, neighborly tone that had characterized every interaction. "Well, folks, looks like we got your bug problem sorted out. The cleanup crews are handling the debris, and we've neutralized all the active Scourge technology we could find." The Zealothy Council had prepared an extensive list of rewards and honors to offer their saviors. Rare metals from their mining worlds, access to their most advanced technologies, even territorial grants and permanent trading agreements. These were the kinds of payments that had started wars between smaller civilizations. "Captain Brooks," Elder Thyras began formally, "the Zealothy Confederation wishes to express our eternal gratitude. We have prepared substantial compensation for your invaluable assistance. Our finest technologies, our rarest resources, permanent diplomatic status." "Oh, that's really sweet of you." Brooks interrupted with what sounded like genuine warmth. But honestly, we don't need much. If you could just share those technical specifications for your energy systems. Some of our engineers are curious about how you guys generate power so efficiently, and maybe some stories about your history and culture, that'd be plenty. The Zealoty delegation exchanged confused looks. Stories? They were offering treasures that could transform entire civilizations. And these humans wanted bedtime tales? We could certainly provide historical records, Thyrath managed. But surely there must be something else? Territory? Resources? Advanced weapons? Brooks laughed, and somehow that casual amusement was more unsettling than any threat could have been. What would we do with more territory? Earth keeps us plenty busy, and we're not really hurting for resources. Turns out living on a world that's constantly trying to kill you makes you pretty good at making do with what you have. As the human fleet began preparations for departure, the full scope of what the Zealoty had unleashed began to dawn on their leadership. They'd sent out a distress call that had been answered by the galactic equivalent of apex predators, being so adapted to survival that they treated interstellar warfare as a casual favor for neighbors. Dr. Foster's voice came over the comm as she finished her final equipment checks. Oh, and thanks for letting us take some samples of that Scourge tech. Really fascinating stuff once you get past all the Murderbot programming. We're already thinking of ways to adapt it for mining operations and deep space construction. The Zealoty scientists felt their blood run cold. This human had not only survived direct exposure to technology that had driven their best researchers to madness, she was planning to use it for industrial applications, like it was just another tool in a workshop. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of the whole situation was becoming increasingly clear. The humans had absolutely no idea how extraordinary they were. To them, this had genuinely been just another day helping out some neighbors who'd run into trouble. They showed no awareness that they'd just demonstrated capabilities that would fundamentally shift the balance of power in the galaxy. Anyway, Captain Brooks said as the human ships began moving toward the hyperspace jump point, "If you folks run into any more trouble, just give us a call. Earth's always willing to lend a hand to friends in need." As the human fleet vanished into hyperspace, Elder Thyrath realized that the Zealoty's distress call had accomplished something far more significant than just saving their civilization. They had accidentally announced to the universe that there was a new player in the game, a species that lived on a world so hostile it forged them into something unprecedented. Beings who could casually solve problems that brought advanced civilizations to their knees. The really scary part wasn't that these Deathworlders existed. It was that they were friendly, helpful, and completely unaware of how absolutely terrifying they appear to everyone else. They genuinely thought that surviving on a volcanic, storm-battered, predator-infested world was normal, and that helping out struggling neighbors was just basic politeness. The Zealoty had been saved, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they'd also fundamentally changed the galaxy forever. And the humans responsible for that change were probably already back home, telling stories about their little trip to help some folks with a robot problem over dinner with their families. Just another Tuesday for the galaxy's newest apex predators.